Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm just going to leave it a couple more seconds just to make sure a few more people can join, and then we will kick off. Perfect. Well, I think a few more people have now joined, so I'll just get started. So today, as you can see, we are going to be focusing on customs, and we're going to be looking at kind of customs made simple and what's changing and what you need to know when you're looking to scale into new markets. I am joined by Toby over from the team at AVASK. As some of you may know, we are now working a lot closely with the team over there. So hopefully there'll be a lot more kind of cross collaboration like this in future as well. For those who don't know me, I am Liam. I am the kind of face of SimplyVAT at the moment when it comes to all of our webinars. And I am the partnerships and business development manager. So I kind of support as people scale into these new markets. And then I'll shortly hand over to Toby, who will kind of introduce himself, his position, and a bit more about customs. Before that, we're just going to go through a few house rules, pretty straightforward and very kind of standard. We encourage you to ask any questions, as I'm sure this is going to be quite a new topic for a lot of our audience. So please do ask any questions throughout the webinar. Pop them in the comments section, and there'll be a Q&A session towards the end of today's session. We can also look at this as a watch on demand. So following today's session, when it ends, you will be circulated a link and you can watch this at any time as well, just if you have any further questions or you wanted to revisit anything we discuss. And be sure to sign up for our SimplyVAT newsletter. As mentioned, we are hoping to do a lot more kind of cross-collaborative content in the future. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of collaborate further and you can get first access. Looking at what we're going to be covering specifically. So I'm just going to be focusing on the customs 101, essentially the foundations, what customs is, why it really matters, and how border processes work in simple everyday kind of language. The key terms are going to be made easy for us to understand, looking at duties, tariffs, commodity codes, and Incoterms, looking at how declarations work as well at customs and what is going to be changing within the customs world. Before we jump into that section, we're just going to briefly touch on VAT. I know a lot of you watching this may be familiar with the topic, but as we all know, VAT and customs do really go hand in hand, as typically, obviously, if you're shipping across into another country, you will have kind of taxes to look at moving forward. With this, obviously VAT, what is VAT? If just in case anyone doesn't know, value-added tax is a goods and services tax used to collect revenue from end customers. It is not to be a burden on businesses, and if you are VAT registered, you can recoup or offset VAT incurred on imports or purchases when you're scaling into these new markets. When you are exporting your goods into the EU, there are some types of suppliers are subject to specific rules, so you may need to just look at certain like HS codes or how your goods are treated in particular, as obviously it does depend on the product type. You also need to identify the precise nature of the goods to determine the VAT treatment. Moving forward, and intra-EU VAT simplifications can also take place, which is why you need to be able to determine the exact flow of your goods. So you just need to ensure that you know kind of where your goods are coming from and where they are landing moving forward. When we look at shipping as a whole, there's a few things you need to look at. So that's going to be the VAT number. It's required for in each country where if you're storing goods or if you're kind of importing goods at the border, typically. The ORI number is also the most important thing when you're actually importing, as I'm sure Toby will highlight again very shortly. You also need to look at EPR compliance and product compliance. This will typically be maybe something that you'll need to look at further down the line or at the start. Really just depends. We find businesses do it either way, but those are the most important things that you need to focus on. And now it's time to look at moving your inventory across once all of those have been obtained and settled. And without further ado, the reason why we are here today is looking at customs. So I will pass over to Toby, who will go through a bit further about that now.
Perfect. Thanks, Liam, and great to be joining this webinar today and talking a bit more detail about customs, why it's needed, and a bit of a background into the UK and the EU situation. But I think Liam just touched upon some really important parts of customs. Is often seen as the final piece in the sense where we can't support with the customs declarations until you're compliant with things such as VAT and EPR. So those sort of fundamentals often happen before, and then we can look to support with the customs side of things. Before going into a bit of detail about customs, so my name's Toby and I'm the Customs and Trade Manager at AVASK. I'm situated in our Southampton headquarters, just near the docks, and my role is helping businesses, global businesses, move their shipments either into the UK, into the EU, or worldwide. The majority of businesses that I support are helping them move their inventory into either the UK or into Europe, where it's then sold on either online marketplaces or on the website. As Liam mentioned, we will be having sort of questions at the end. So on the right-hand side, I think there's a comment box. Please do feel free to put in any questions and we will address those as and when. Perfect. So before kind of getting into the technical side of customs and how we can kind of support with shipments, a little bit of an overview, because the last sort of 4 or 5 years, the UK and the EU situation has been widely publicised in the news, but it is important to understand where we are now and what has changed if you haven't maybe started shipping into the EU, or maybe you used to 5 or 10 years ago. So the Brexit happened. It was very published in the news maybe 5, 6 years ago and still is today. But around the start of 2021 is where Brexit came into place. And now this is important because it does mean that the way that UK and EU imports work has changed pretty dramatically. So what did change? So firstly, there was a customs border between the UK and the EU. And it means that any shipment that's going from the UK to the EU is going to need an export entry, first of all, to allow it to be exported from the UK. It also means that in order to bring those goods into the EU, an import entry is going to be needed. That means that 2 customs declarations is needed to send a shipment from the UK going to Italy, France, or any other EU country. This also works the other way round. So if you're sending things from Europe going to the UK, there'll need to be a European export entry in order to allow the shipment to leave Europe, and a UK import entry to allow the shipment to be imported into the UK. Now, these customs declarations, they are often submitted by your freight forwarder or your customs broker, but it does mean that the requirement, they will need some further information from you in order to move these shipments if you're acting as the exporter or the importer. So the requirement on you as a business has increased in providing additional details. When a shipment or when an import entry is submitted, either to the UK authorities if you're bringing something into the UK, or the EU authorities if you're bringing things into the EU, the importer will have to pay potentially import duties and import VAT. Now, import duties are a cost of business, and it's important that when you're pricing your goods, you are aware of what it's costing you to import your products, so that you're not pricing your products too low and not getting the correct margins on it. At the sort of final part of Brexit, just before it came in, there was a lot in the news about a trade agreement between the UK and EU. So what this means is if you're sending products from Europe to the UK, if the goods were manufactured or the country of origin is in Europe, you shouldn't have to pay import duties if you can prove that the goods are European origin when you're importing them to the UK. This works vice versa as well. So if you're sending UK products that have been manufactured or originate in the UK to Europe, the importer shouldn't have to pay import duties if you can prove that the goods are legitimately UK origin. Next slide, please. Thank you. So customs clearance, so this is the process of submitting the documentation to the customs authorities at the time of either import or export. So AVASK are a customs broker, so if you were sending a shipment from the UK going to France, it's likely that the export or the place of export would be down at Dover port. And before the driver can leave Dover, AVASK would need to submit an export entry to allow your products to leave. Likewise, when your products were arriving, if it was, say, at Calais port, you would need to have an import entry prepared, often in advance, to allow the truck to arrive in France and continue to its final destination. This is not something that's optional. It's a case of this has to happen for shipments now between the UK and EU. You also will need import entries if you were importing or sending shipments from the USA going into Europe or UK. So any shipment that's arriving into the UK or Europe from outside of that jurisdiction will require an import entry. So why is this important? If there are delays at customs, this is often quite expensive. So if a truck has to be stopped whilst it has shipments on it, there's often storage or demurrage fees which the transport agent or your freight forwarder would likely pass to you. So it's really important that you're aware of when you're moving your inventory or when you're importing products, that you're aware of the customs requirements to ensure that you can not have to have these storage or demurrage fees, which can be quite costly. So what do you need to do, and what are we going to focus on? So we tend to speak with businesses that are looking to import their products. And what we mean by importing is bringing your stock into the UK or EU. So often you'll be a business, or there'll be hopefully people tuning in here who are buying inventory, and they want to move that inventory into either the UK or EU to be sold. So what do you need as a business to bring your products into either the UK or the EU? So if you're bringing products into the UK, you will need a GB EORI number and a GB VAT number if you want to reclaim the import VAT. So the GB EORI number is a number which is linked to your VAT number, which allows you to conduct either import or export activity. You would need to put this on your shipping documentation so your customs broker can add your GB EORI number, and that allows you to act as either an exporter or an importer when you're either importing or exporting into the UK. The VAT number is important if you're looking to reclaim import VAT. What I mean by this is if you're importing products into the UK, you're bringing in inventory from overseas, you may need to pay import duties and import VAT. The import VAT is reclaimable as long as you're VAT registered and you obtain proof of import and provide that to your VAT agent, SimplyVAT, if you're filing with them. You won't just need the VAT and the EORI number. You will need to ensure that the products that you're importing, you are compliant and that these products are allowed to be imported and sold in the UK. Now, this varies depending on the products you're sending. So it could be that there's no additional requirements. It could be that there's some labeling that you need, or it could be that if you're sending high-risk products that you may need some licenses. It's always worth checking the products you're sending and ensuring that you as a business are able to import those products. Now, coming into the EU, and this is where a lot of UK businesses have maybe had issues over the last 5 or 6 years or since Brexit. So you can see that the similarities between on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, you still need a VAT number wherever you're storing inventory in the EU. You do need a separate EU EORI number. You only need one EU EORI number, and that will cover you for the whole EU. But you would need product compliance, and this would be slightly different to the UK side, as the EU would have different labelling and product requirements than the UK. Now, coming into the EU, and why have UK incorporated businesses had issues with EU imports over the sort of last 5 years? So if you're bringing in products, the customs authorities will want somebody to be responsible for your declarations. Let's say there's an issue that you haven't maybe paid the full amount of customs duties. The authorities will want a business that is located in the place of import, so it's easier for them to collect those monies. So if you're importing into the UK and you're a UK incorporated business, if there's any issues or if there's a shortfall of customs payments, the UK or customs authorities can contact you directly. It's a lot easier for HMRC to chase a UK incorporated business for that rather than a foreign side of things. So this translated to the EU. If you're a UK incorporated business importing into the EU, if there were any issues, it's a lot harder for the EU authorities to contact a UK incorporated business. What this means is you will need a customs broker who can support you with customs representation and indirect representation. What this means is that the customs broker becomes jointly and severally liable for the import declarations, and that there's additional risk for that customs broker. Now, many transport agents or customs brokers might not want to take that additional risk or liability. So you may send shipments into Europe and you may be told, oh, your EU EORI number isn't valid, or it's that there's issues submitting the customs declarations. And it's always worth checking this before you send a shipment to the EU where you're acting as the importer. Can your customs broker support you with that customs declaration, even if you are not incorporated in the EU?
Hi, Toby.
Perfect.
Sorry, I have a very quick question just because I thought that was a great point and I wanted to just kind of jump in before we move onwards. With the kind of customs broker, is there a particular point where one may be required or when it should be appointed by e-commerce brands? Or yeah, just kind of get your thoughts on that, because I know some people might be thinking kind of, what is a customs broker and why do I need one, kind of thing?
Yeah, so a really good question, and I'm mentioning terms here which it's good to kind of get definitions of. So where there's transport agent and customs broker, it may sound quite confusing, and you may be thinking, hey, do I have a transport agent or a customs broker or both? What do I need? So how it works is a lot of the time the transport agent will sort out your whole logistics platform. They'll pick it up from you, they'll do your customs entries, and they'll deliver it. And it's great when that happens because it's all under one roof and it's all very, very simple. It can be that actually you may want to appoint your own customs broker, because it could be that if you have suppliers using their transport agent and you have all of these import documents and they're coming from different sources, that can get quite confusing. And we know when it comes to VAT reclaim, it can be a pain to try and locate all of these documents. So it could be that you choose as a business, hey, I want to make sure the VAT reclaim is really simple. I want, if there's a customs audit, I want everything in one place. I want to have a customs broker, which no matter which transport agent I'm using, I am going to be using this customs broker, so that when SimplyVAT asks me for my import documents, I can ask one point of contact rather than trying to look through lots of different transport agents. In terms of when is it necessary, I think a lot of the time transport agents maybe won't support with customs declarations, especially in the EU for UK-based businesses. So it may be that you're not given a choice and you need to kind of locate a customs broker. So it's not necessarily a case of there's a definitive time of when you import X amount, you need a customs broker. It will depend on the transport agents you're using and the sort of type of movements if you're purchasing from multiple different suppliers. If not sure, we can always book a call. We can go through the supply chain and discuss what kind of options are available.
So it's not really dependent on, if they're doing like massive volumes or small volumes, like necessarily people may not need it if they're just maybe moving like individual shipments across rather than one big bulk kind of thing. So, if I'm sending, say, direct to consumer, I might not need any of those things. But if I'm doing a big bulk shipment into, say, Amazon's warehouse in Germany, then that's probably where it's more recommended, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and kind of touching on that B2C versus B2B stuff. So a lot of the times with B2C shipments, it's a small value, and often you'll get a courier, or a fast parcel operator. So we're talking like DHL, UPS, FedEx, and they'll pick it up from you. They'll do all of the customs, and as it's low value, it tends to be very quick, very easy the majority of times. Now, if you're doing the B2B side, and this is where if you're maybe moving your inventory into Amazon in Germany or other warehouses in Germany, You want to make sure that when you're importing those products that you are paying the correct amount of customs fees, and also you're reclaiming that import VAT. You're getting proof of import, because Amazon are asking businesses for this. So that's when it's a case of, yeah, maybe if there's more complexity in your supply chain, having a customs broker does give you that confidence of kind of a singular point of contact there.
Cool. Thank you.
Perfect. And just talking about importing into the UK, and I speak with lots of businesses incorporated in the UK, and there has been something around the Brexit time which has been really helpful for UK-based businesses. And this postponed VAT accounting, we'll go into a bit of detail, but it's something that has made the UK much more efficient as a country to import into. But firstly, just understanding importing into the UK and what happens here. So typically, if you're a business and you're importing products to the UK, you would be acting as an importer. We've seen in the last slide, you're going to need the UK VAT, the product compliance, and that GB ORI number. When a shipment arrives in the UK, your transport agent or your customs broker will ask you for the shipping documentation, and they'll submit an import entry to you. Now, historically, what would happen is you'd have to pay import VAT, which would be 20% of the customs value, and then you'd have to wait until your UK VAT returns in order to reclaim that money. Now, this isn't always great for cash flow in the case of you have to pay and then wait a few months. So around 2020, 2021, the UK have this postponed VAT accounting system. And it's worth just making sure, if you are importing into the UK, this is something that does seem to help out in terms of cash flow. So rather than having to pay the import VAT and then waiting for your VAT returns to reclaim it, when your customs broker or your transport agent submits your import entry, they can put your VAT number, they can mention that you would like to postpone the import VAT using postpone VAT accounting, PVA. What that means is you don't have to pay that 20% at the time of import. Whoever's filing your UK VAT will just have to mark when they're submitting that you have this shipment, you've postponed the VAT, and then make sure that you're correctly filing the VAT. So this helps for multiple reasons. One is the cash flow element. It can also save money, as customs brokers and transport agents often charge a deferment fee or a handling fee when they're paying the VAT on your behalf and sending you an invoice for that. In terms of importing into the EU, there is similar side of things in certain countries. So France and Netherlands are two countries which have a favourable way of paying import VAT and reclaiming it or deferring that import VAT. Liam?
Sorry, I was literally about to bring that up as well, because it's a question I get asked all the time when I'm on kind of client calls, especially as they're scaling like brand new into the market. Obviously, as you've just highlighted there, France is typically one that people favour. But I actually wanted to ask, is there one that you recommend to people who are kind of entering for the first time when you're looking at kind of postponing that import VAT? Because it is great for cash flow.
Yes, 100%, yeah. And I think before kind of talking about countries in the EU which are maybe best, I think important tip for this webinar, number one, if you're importing, especially into Europe as a UK business, make sure that you get a copy of your import entries and make sure you're aware if you've paid import VAT. If you're the importer and you've paid import VAT, make sure you are reclaiming that import VAT by speaking to your VAT agent. I do these webinars quite frequently. I speak with a lot of clients, and there are definite times where clients have been paying thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, and sometimes more, and they're not aware that they're able to provide the import entry to their VAT agent, who's able to sort of support with a reclaim. So please double check. If you're importing into the EU, have you got a copy of your import entry? Are you correctly listed as the importer? And have you provided that to your VAT agent? Coming on to which countries are best into the EU. So a lot of people want to send shipments to Germany because that's often the biggest marketplace. When sending, if you're doing a customs clearance in Germany, unfortunately, there's no way for customs brokers to defer that import VAT, such as the postponed VAT scheme in the UK. Other ways to kind of import into the EU without having that cash flow issue. France, Liam, you've mentioned, is a great country for importing. So France has actually it enforces postponed VAT accounting if you're VAT registered in France and your import entry is occurring in France and you're the importer. So France is a great country, and Netherlands and Belgium we do see as other like gateways to Europe. So they provide favourable ways of importing it there, and even if you're not VAT registered in those countries, if the shipment's leaving to go to Germany or another EU country, you can defer the import VAT at the time of import.
And just on that as well, because I don't know whether you know much about this, so apologies, obviously, if this is a country that you're not too sure about, but I've heard Poland also could offer postponed VAT accounting. I know Poland's quite tricky to reclaim VAT backwards. I've been handling quite a few of those questions recently, but when it comes to the actual import, do you know if that is a possibility? Because I know it is quite a growing market as well over there.
100% in terms of the growing market and the demand for storing in Poland. We see some good 3PL availability in Poland, and at very sort of favourable rates compared to some other EU countries. In terms of importing into Poland, you touched on a really good point there of there is potentially ways to postpone import VAT in Poland, but it's not quite, or from our side, we haven't found it as simple as, say, France and Netherlands and Belgium. So at this moment in time, AVASK don't offer that service in Poland. However, we are aware that there is the possibility. We do know it's quite complex with regards to the VAT reclaim. And that takes me on to my next point with Poland is if you kind of go, oh, brilliant, Poland, I've got a 3PL there, I can send shipments there and reclaim. We have historically seen Poland very hard to reclaim import VAT, and there's requirements to have bank accounts, etc. So before doing any imports directly into Poland, if the import entry is going to occur in Poland, I would strongly advise to check with your VAT agent. The last thing you want to do is import a container worth 40,000 euros and have a large VAT bill that you've had to pay and cannot reclaim because there's some complexions or issues with Polish bank accounts or anything else.
Yeah, it's quite complex. From a partnerships perspective, I've spoken with quite a few banking providers, and yeah, it's quite difficult to get the Polish bank account. So that's great insight. Thank you. I will let you move forward.
Perfect. So the cost of cross-border sales. So what happens when goods are crossing a customs border? So we touched upon slightly earlier about sort of duties and tariffs and what these are. And we mentioned Brexit was in the news sort of 4 or 5 years ago. Talking of tariffs, and these, especially in the US, have been a hot topic recently. So in the UK, EU, we tend to call them customs duties. In the US, are often called tariffs. What these are is a similar sort of thing. So these are taxes imposed on the importing country, and this is normally a percentage based on the type of products and the country of origin. So what I mean by the HS code, every single product is given a number, and that number is used on the import declaration, and that tells the customs authority what type of product that is. So, for example, if you're importing some plastic kitchenware, that will have a number which tells the customs authorities that you're importing kitchenware of plastics. Each different customs location can then set duty rates based on the type of products. So it could be that the UK chooses to put a 6% duty rate on plastic kitchenware, and it may choose to put a 12% duty rate on polyester t-shirts. So in one way to make it even more complicated, it's not just the type of product, it can also be the country it's coming from or the country of origin. So if we say that the polyester t-shirts were 12%, it could be that the 12% is the standard rate. So if it was coming from China to the UK, upon import in the UK, you may have to pay an additional 12% in import duties, and this is a cost which you cannot reclaim. So when there's trade deals announced, this is really important because it could be that the standard rate is 12%, but it could be as UK and Pakistan has a trade deal. If you import the same products, but it's of Pakistan origin rather than China, you may pay 0% duties. Now, why is this important? As duties are a cost of business, it may mean that choosing the supplier, or it could be that a change of trade agreements between the UK and other countries could make other suppliers a better choice for you, as it could mean that your cost costs are lower and you're able to either pass that cost on to your final customer, or it could be that your margins have increased. So typically the HS code and the country of origin would get a percentage, and that percentage would be multiplied by the value for what you're paying in terms of import duties. Unfortunately, it's not just import duties. There's import taxes or import VAT, which we touched upon previously. If the importer is able to reclaim the import VAT, as long as they receive proof of import and they are listed as the importer, and they need to provide that to their VAT agent. So what do you need to take from this? So we want to make sure that you're using the correct code to classify your products, because if you're saying that you're importing a polyester t-shirt, but it's actually a cotton t-shirt, it could be that you're using the wrong percentage, and it could be that you have to pay extra duties in the future. Incoterms, so if you're purchasing products from another business and it's an international trade, you will need to agree Incoterms, and this sets the responsibilities between the buyer and the seller, and in turn who's responsible for sorting out things like the customs and the payment of import duties and taxes. And we touched upon free trade agreements and how it's really important to kind of know which countries the UK and EU has a trade agreement with, as this can save you a lot of money with regards to customs duties. So touched upon a lot of the information on importing products and how the sort of technical side in order to bring products into the UK or the EU. So AVASK can support with this. So we have a customs department, our headquarters in the UK, but we also do have offices throughout Europe. Our EU headquarters is in Amsterdam. So AVASK have a partnership with Amazon, which if you're sending inventory from the UK going into Amazon FBA in the EU, there is a program between AVASK and Amazon, which is favorable. This is a case of you do have to be sending to FBA. It has to be coming from the UK. It can't be going from any other place. But we do find that this is a popular program, and it helps a lot of sellers get their shipments from the UK going to Amazon in the EU. The brokerage fee for this is €60 per shipment, which is, we believe, is competitive. The first shipment is free. There is an annual fee, which is €200, but there is a promotion with Amazon where Amazon will pay for the first year and the first shipment. So you get effectively €260 of subsidies from Amazon. Now, if this sounds like something that is interesting, please do reach out. We can go through in a bit more detail. There are often webinars on this topic, so we can make sure that those are provided. In short, it's to send inventory from the UK going to Amazon FBA in the EU, and as members of SimplyVAT, we want to provide you this information where Amazon is giving the first year free and the first shipment free. Now, in terms of how AVASK can support it, it may be that you were looking at that side and think, well, that's great, but I don't need support with that. I need to send something from, I've got a supplier in China or the US, and I want to send my shipment into a 3PL in the UK or a 3PL in the EU. So this is where AVASK, it's a case of we can support in whatever you would require there. So if it is a case of Amazon FBA coming from the UK, we have that Amazon partnership and customs program. But if you wanted to talk a bit more detailed about your particular situation in your supply chain and how you can ensure, smooth imports or exports, either shipments coming into the UK, into the EU, or anywhere else, we can support. So we can make sure that you as a UK business or as a e-commerce business can bring your products in and make sure they're available to be sold to your final customer. And just touching upon, it's not just the sort of customs side, so there are other things that AVASK can do to support. So we are in the compliance sector, so if there's anything that you should need in order to make sure that you remain compliant when running your business globally, we like to think we can support. So things like extended producer responsibility, EPR, which is a green eco tax. There's the customs side and also the customs shipping end-to-end transport. We have that partnership with Amazon, so we can support you with sending shipments to FBA, and we are there to support with any marketplace system integration and with global expansion. So between AVASK and SimplyVAT, we like to think we've covered a lot of compliance sections, and we're here to support you and making sure that you're able to expand smoothly. And just coming back to at the very start, Liam went through and was talking about the VAT side, and this is really important because when we're sending shipments and when we're talking about customs declarations and reclaiming import VAT, none of this is possible unless you've got the fundamentals. So if you haven't got VAT numbers where you intend to store, if you're not complying with product regulations, then it's not possible for us to compliantly submit an import declaration, and that's where there are things you need to do first. So it could be that you're in this webinar and you're thinking, hey, in Q4, I want to be shipping to the EU. If you're not VAT registered in certain countries, that's where you probably want to start thinking about that fairly soon, because if you're not VAT registered in Germany, we can't submit a customs entry for you to import your products in Germany to be sold. So it's worth making sure you have that in advance. Or if you're just thinking about it now, please take note of how long certain things can take, because it's unfortunately not a case of a week to obtain VAT or EPR or product compliance side of things. I think we're coming to the end of regards to the sort of slides coming, but I can see Liam's popped back on camera, so back to you, Liam.
I'm back. Yeah, I just wanted to really go over your last point there, because it is a case of, we've all had these conversations on a day-by-day basis. It's not as quick as we think it's going to be sometimes, I believe, when it comes to the VAT side of things. I mean, for US-based businesses or any US business kind of watching today, France and Germany, for example, are taking quite a while at the moment. We've recently seen France take 5 to 6 months for a US business to obtain their VAT number. So it is really thinking in advance. So I think that was a great kind of point to land on. But finally, we're going to be jumping into our Q&A session. So if anyone wants to kind of ask any more questions, please do feel free to kind of add them into the comment section. We have got some that we've already collated from a few of our kind of clients, because as mentioned, this is quite a new topic to the SimplyVAT client base, and we've typically not answered anything like this before. We have had one viewer question at the moment. With the kind of viewer side of things, they've asked a question kind of, if a UK registered company imports or exports goods to or from the rest of the world, is that applicable? So I'm assuming they mean that if that's kind of outside of the EU and they're importing into the UK and they're UK based.
Yeah, so where we're talking imports and exports, so I'll just cover a few things there. So if you're bringing products into the UK from Europe, US, rest of the world, you will need an import entry at the time the goods arrive in the UK. On that import entry, you may have to pay customs duties depending on the HS code and the country of origin, and import VAT. Import VAT is import VAT, and that is payable and reclaimable, or you can utilize postponed VAT accounting, which we covered briefly earlier. That it's not to be confused with if you're sending products, and this is where we're talking about the exports. If you're sending a shipment from the UK going into another country, say it's going to Europe, US, or overseas, that's where you wouldn't be submitting an import entry into the UK, so you wouldn't have to pay import VAT. In terms of where this was going, it may be that the importer in, say, Europe may have to pay import VAT, but the majority of time that would not be paid in the UK.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think one of the main questions that we typically face as well is just, what is the kind of importance, I guess, of providing that correct documentation? Is there anything that's really, really key to making sure you have that prepared before the goods land? Is there anything you see people miss? I know a lot of questions all in one there, but yeah, just kind of anything that you can really share on that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm going to come with the sort of point 2 to please take away from this webinar. So people always ask me, why is my shipment stuck in customs, or what can I do to try and make it as smooth as possible? 9 times out of 10, the reason shipments are taking longer or the shipments are held in customs is due to incorrect or missing information provided to the transport agent or courier. So there's two things to do here. Firstly is try and check as much in advance. If you can provide it before the shipment leaves and get sort of as much of it checked as possible, that reduces the risk. And also B, try and make sure the information provided is correct. So we were talking about commodity codes earlier. Make sure you understand the commodity codes for your products. Make sure the country of origin is correct. If you're acting as the importer, make sure you list your full company details with your VAT numbers in the country of destination and your EORI number, whether that's the UK one if it's a UK import or an EU one in the EU import. So please check in advance with your freight forwarder or customs broker and double check the information provided. It is important, and incorrect information does tend to cause a lot of delays.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I find that it is something that we typically kind of face questions on when it comes to kind of imports happening. And I do find, yeah, people obviously don't want to face any delays, especially when it has taken so long, you know, to get the goods into the country to begin with, especially with that VAT piece as well. And I think we have had quite a few more comments. So if we're looking at the first one, I think this comes from Chuko Clothing. So they're importing goods from Pakistan into the UK and then to the US, but still paying duties despite a trade agreement. Do you know why that would be? Is it because the goods have been imported and then re-exported? Would you say?
Yeah, you're correct there. So this is a really important point, especially if you are importing products in from a country with a trade agreement. So detailed in the trade agreement, it does list a clause along the lines of, in order to be applicable, the goods have to go from the origin country to the destination country without clearing customs to stop it being amended or anything in short. So in terms of advice, or what we could suggest there is, if you're sending shipments to the UK, that's brilliant. They can claim from the free trade agreement. If it needs to go to the US, there's two options. If you go via the UK and you need to clear it through customs in the UK, unfortunately, if you send those same products to the US, you have to pay import duties when they arrive in the US. Ways around it, you can send maybe from Pakistan directly to the US if that's possible, or you may be able to send it from Pakistan to the UK but not clear it through customs and then re-export it to the US, and then you may be okay. So again, this can be a very costly part of business. With a lot of clothing, it can tend to be import duties of 10% plus, so it can be a real cost of business, and it's worth understanding all options available so you can do that cost benefit analysis of, is there a way I can bypass the UK in order to save some import duties?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great piece of insight. And also, I think that really rings true for anyone who might be kind of importing then re-exporting as well, because obviously VAT and duties will likely be re-applicable. Moving on to the next one, we've had a question from Mantra London, and it's looking at the small parcel tax. As we all know, it's something that is coming into play, and it looks like something is, you know, everything seems to be piecing together some information at the moment. So yeah, just wanted to know if you had any developments on that, or if there was any strategy that you would recommend for people who are, you know, going to be faced with that small parcel tax as the goods kind of go through.
Yeah, good. Firstly, good question. And before answering it, just going to take half a step back to maybe explain a bit about this, as we didn't cover this too much in the webinar. So the webinar was mainly talking about importing your inventory in maybe bulk or in mass to then be stored in a country and then sold on either Amazon or other marketplaces. So this question is regarding sending singular orders from either the UK or outside of the EU into the EU. So these are typically smaller orders, and there's been a customs reform in the EU, which has meant that there's going to be changes upcoming. So these changes are coming pretty soon in July, and what there's going to be is a fee per parcel that's being sent from the UK to the EU, and it's quite substantial in the grand scheme of things. I think it starts at €3, and there's other countries are adding additional fees on this. From my understanding as well, as it may even be per commodity code. So if you're sending a couple of different products, it could be that you're paying €8 in additional fees for a shipment that's only maybe worth 20 or 30 euros, which may make this side of fulfilling orders a lot less attractive. So in terms of what's the best strategy and what can we do? So firstly, has there been any developments? No, we're expecting this to come in this year from July. in terms of best strategy, it's going to be quite hard, I think, for a lot of businesses to absorb this cost. If we're talking about €8 additional charges on a €40 shipment, we're talking about 20% addition in sort of fees, and there's no way of reclaiming that fee or much you can do. This is EU legislation, and there's not a great deal that you can do to support that. However, what you might be able to do is kind of look at the alternatives. So rather than maybe storing your inventory in the UK and fulfilling order by order, it could be that you actually get VAT registered, say in France or Germany. You could import a bulk of your products there. And then when you get an order in France, Germany, or the rest of the EU, rather than it coming from the UK and you having to pay this fee per parcel, you can fulfill it from your France inventory, and you wouldn't be subject to those customs fees on an individual level. Whether this strategy is going to work, it will depend on your circumstances, but I think that's where a lot of businesses are trying to make that decision of, hey, do I continue with this where it may kind of see a drop in demand? There is that investment of obtaining the VAT number and the compliance and the shipping side, but that may be more of a long-term strategy. I'm not sure, Liv, if you've got anything to add on to that or anything that you wanted me to clarify.
No, I think that's a kind of great point. Something that we're recommending, or I've definitely recommended to people when it comes to scaling into these new markets, especially with this parcel tax that's coming into play, is maybe to look at kind of bulk clearance or looking at maybe warehousing inside the EU, especially as you mentioned, France there. We all know France is the country that's kind of introduced it first. So they are kind of, trialing everything at the moment. It's definitely fun moving forward. Let me just tell you that when it comes to looking at these conversations. But I do think maybe, especially if your main market is France, warehousing inside there could be a great kind of step. It also helps to scale your brand as you move forward. But no, I think that was very clear. Thank you. If we look at, we've got one question that's come like pre this webinar today, which I think could be a really good one for us to kind of look at. And that's when it comes to the importance of like HS codes, are there any risks associated with putting or inputting the incorrect HS code or product description in the online sales? Do you know if anything could determine that at the border when the goods land, if it is incorrect?
Yeah, I think firstly, there's multiple things that can arise from putting incorrect commodity codes or goods description, or in general, providing incorrect documents which will be needed in moving your shipments internationally. So the first one is it's likely to have more holdups in the sense where the broker might not be able to submit the documents, which is a first delay. It could be that they submit them, but customs are more likely to want to check certain things if a document's incorrect. And then it can also be actually that post clearance. So it could be that actually after there's audits on certain things and we find that there's incorrect commodity codes and either additional duties or fines may need to be paid. So yeah, really important to get it going, to get it correctly, to make sure that you're paying the correct amounts, you're not under or overpaying, making sure your shipments are smooth in transit, and also just making sure that you're future-proof in your business and making sure you're as compliant as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. And we've got just one last question, really, which I think will be good for us to kind of end on today. If anyone does have any other questions, however, please do feel free to just pop them into the comment section, and we'll likely kind of come to you after the end of today's webinar. But is there any trends that everyone should be watching out for in regards to customs this year, or any updates, maybe outside of the small parcel tax, that we can kind of look at as well as we lean into the end of 2026 and also 2027?
Yeah, I think in terms of short-term trends, I think there's a lot of businesses that maybe are a bit head in the sand with this B2C Europe coming in. It's worth preparing now. You don't want any surprises come July. You don't want to be thinking, hey, my EU orders have kind of deteriorated. Why is that? And potentially it's something that's preventable in terms of this additional fees. The other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be unaware of it and find out that actually you're losing money for your EU orders because each one is now coming with an additional fee which you weren't aware of. So I think that's something that we'll see a lot in the next sort of 3 to 6 months in e-commerce businesses. Who reacts well to that, who adapts. And as we often see in e-commerce, it's the ones that adapt that can often have the better long-term or the sort of growth. I think the other thing that I often say in terms of international trade and international shipments is, as an e-commerce business, nobody cares about your shipment as much as yourself. And what I mean by that is you want to kind of double check every part of your shipment. Let's say, for example, you were importing a shipment from China to the UK. You want to make sure that all parts of that shipment's correct. So you want to be aware of who's collecting it from the supplier. Is that your responsibility, or is that your supplier's responsibility? What the Incoterms terms that you've agreed with your supplier. You want to be aware of, hey, is it going via ocean, via air? If it's going via ocean, what's the transit time? Is that the current transit time, or is that the transit time from 3 months ago when there wasn't lots of disruption in the Middle East? So all of these things you can want to assume that no one's going to kind of, you want to make sure you're aware of all of that information. So choosing partners that you can provide you reliable information, or just making sure when it comes to arriving in the UK, who's submitting your customs declaration? Is it your freight forwarder? Do you need to find your own customs agent? All of these things, I'd say the businesses that tend to do well in the long term, especially when we do see disruptions in international shipping, are the ones that kind of make sure they're using reliable partners and really look at all of their shipments from a detailed side of things, because it can change. We see there's always something going on with international shipping, whether it's tariffs, whether there's a ship blocking the Suez Canal, whether it's something else. There's always something going on, and it's the businesses who are aware of this, adapt, and they're using the reliable partners to make sure that their inventory can keep coming in, are the ones that kind of can go. So I always say, in terms of trends, we probably don't know what the next international shipping trend is going to be. It could be some more disruption in one of the shipping lanes. It could be retaliation tariffs. I think what you want to be if you're involved in international trade, you want to ensure you know your supply chain, you're using good partners so that you're able to adapt no matter what that sort of trend or potential issue is.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's great advice as well, especially, just as a business, just knowing your supply chain. So, and maybe coming up with a plan B, just in case there is any further disruption, which hopefully there won't be. But obviously, as we've seen over the last few months, there have been a few kind of delays and disruptions. So just future proofing that business. But yeah, again, thank you so much, Toby, for joining today's session, and for everyone who's tuned in and asked questions. If we haven't got around to your question, we will come through email at some point over the next few days and just kind of discuss with you. Maybe there's a bit more detail that we need in order to answer your question. But yeah, again, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day. Keep your eyes peeled for the next webinar.
Thanks, Liam, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.